know what it is. You know why you're back. The free agency market is just getting more and more interesting. There's a lot of stories to go over. We're going to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks and their stadium deal. We're going to talk about Matt Bonner and his iPhone troubles. We're going to talk about David Lee being traded to Boston. And of course, we're going to talk about the biggest news, DeAndre Jordan and his free agency status. But first, let's talk about the Milwaukee Stadium deal. I can speak about this in generalities because this is going on all over the country across all major sports. Right now, if you buy an NBA team, you do not have to finance your own stadium. I mean, it'd be like it's really gotten to the point where it's basically a racket. You have politicians selling out the citizens of their city, giving away hundreds of millions of dollars that the city doesn't have to finance building stadiums that, frankly, very few people in the city want. Here in Chicago, we're dealing with the same thing with Wrigley Field. I've never gone to a Cubs game. I've never watched a Cubs game for more than a couple of innings. I don't care if the Cubs move to another state. Why should my tax dollars go to pay for their stadium? It makes no sense. It doesn't benefit me at all. And it doesn't benefit anyone I know at all. And by the way, and here's where you have to do something that, we call doing the knowledge. You got to do the knowledge on this stuff. That is not the way that commerce is supposed to work. You're not supposed to buy a company and then the public just finances everything about it. There's no reason why these hedge fund managers that bought the Milwaukee Bucks can't build their own stadium. They have near unlimited capital and their friends have near unlimited capital. Why can't they get people to invest in this team? It makes no sense. And in a state like Milwaukee, where they have a governor that is politically and from a policy perspective beating down regular state employees that just want to collect on the pensions that they've been paying into, he's beating them down. And then the city of Milwaukee will turn around and then say, yeah, sure, we can't afford teachers, but we can afford to hand over $470 million after they pay down the interest. Because that's the thing. The city's gonna have to take out a loan to pay this off. Why are you borrowing money to build a stadium for some billionaires? That makes no earthly sense. And here's the thing. It makes even less sense when you consider what being a basketball fan and being a professional sports fan should be about right now. Remember, we got to do the knowledge here. So this takes work. This isn't something that's going to be easy for you to digest. This is supposed to be something that we're thinking about. Why in the age of NBA TV and in an age where most of us can't afford to go to a game, where we consume the product of the NBA, if we're fans, we consume that product through television, through the internet. That's how we consume the product. We don't even consume the product at the games. Why do I care what geographic location the team is? Why should that matter? I'm not necessarily a person that goes around and watches a lot of Bulls games. If the Bulls are particularly entertaining that year, then I will watch them more. But I watch everybody in the league. I watch the teams in the league that I enjoy. That's who I watch because I'm fortunate enough where I can afford NBA TV and because I have the internet. I don't go around and say, man, what's going on with the Bulls? And that's the end all be all. That's not the way we should be consuming sports. It's foolish for someone to consume it that way. It really is. And for the Milwaukee Bucks, and again, for politicians who will not honor the commitments that they've made to regular working class citizens and cry broke anytime any regular working citizen needs help. You cry broke and you say you can't afford it. And then to turn around and raid the coffers and raid pensions to pay for a stadium, it's inexcusable. Right now in the city of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel is at the same time he's telling teachers that he can't honor the pension commitments. And at the same time, he's asking to borrow money from those pensions that these teachers need to survive after they retire. At the same time he's doing that, he's going to hand over hundreds of millions of dollars to the Ricketts family so they can build Wrigley Field. It's inexcusable. It's all inexcusable. And frankly, no one should tolerate it. So, city of Milwaukee, you now have been told what's going on, and it's up to you to determine what you're going to do about the Milwaukee Bucks and the hedge fund managers that own it. Moving along to a fun story. Matt Bonner is not normally a player I would talk about because Matt Bonner isn't good at basketball. So normally I wouldn't talk about him. It always kind of irks me during games when a player like Matt Barnes will hit a shot and then the announcers act like he's good because he hit a wide open shot. It's so silly. And I don't even care if the guy is actually doing stuff that day that's good. We know Matt Bonner's not good. He has a career 11-year record of not being good. So I always think that's weird. But he's in the news now because he did something particularly funny. Matt Bonner didn't play well last year. He never really plays well because he's not asked to do anything that's very difficult. But he was down on his field goal percentage, and for some reason, he decided to start making excuses about it. His statement is very amusing because it starts with, "I hate to make excuses. I was raised never to make excuses." Matt Bonner, I got news for you. You're about to make a bunch of excuses. And by the way, also, your whole career is excuses. People made an excuse to put you in the NBA in the first place. Then they make excuses to keep you on teams. Then the announcers make excuses for you during games as people blow by you over and over again and shoot jump hooks over your head. You're a walking excuse. You're a millionaire excuse. That's what you are. But that's fine. I mean, whatever. I'm kind of glad you're around because I never thought I would hear this, and it's funny. Matt Bonner, and you can, go feel free to type it in your favorite search engine and see if I'm telling the truth. Matt Bonner is claiming that he shot poorly because the iPhone is too big for his hand, and he injured his hand using it. Put it this way. If somebody, my director just gave me some funny direction. I'm not gonna say it on air though. Figure it this way. If somebody made an excuse like that when you were playing pickup basketball, you'd call him a buster and a clown, wouldn't you? This guy's supposed to be a professional basketball player. Now, since we're doing the knowledge today, let's get some things straight and be clear about what we're talking about. This is a Galaxy Note 4. Okay. As far as I know, this is the biggest phone you can go into a store and just buy. It's the biggest phone. See this in my hand? See me using it? Yeah. That's the biggest phone you can buy. Matt Bonner is at least a foot taller than I am. Really, the phone's too big and it hurts your hand. Come on, man. Like, unless he has those, remember that Burger King commercial with the dude with the real tiny hands? And he was like, oh, he said, man, he can't eat at Burger King. Because anyway, it's from a few years ago. Look it up. It's funny. You'll laugh. But dude had baby hands. Unless he's got baby hands, which I've seen him play, his hands are normal size. Unless he's got baby hands, that doesn't make any sense, man. Come on. The reason you shot poorly, Matt, is because you're not a good player. Like, that's why. And him being good or bad has never been why he's in the league. So my guess is that won't be why he's in or out of the league next year. It doesn't have anything to do with it. Now, let's flip to a player that actually is good and talk about something that's worth discussing in terms of basketball analysis. We're going to do the knowledge about David Lee. David Lee used to be a guy, he was called the double-double machine. David Lee, when he was back in you say the bad old days, but the bad old days never stopped for the Knicks at this point. Back, when the Knicks that I remember, the Charles Oakley, Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Anthony Mason Knicks, those are long gone. Chris Childs, Eric Harper, Rolando Blackman and Gerald Wilkins, hard-nosed guys. Those days are long gone, right? The Knicks are a disaster. And David Lee, back in the Jamal Crawford era of the Knicks, when Isaiah Thomas was running the team, and this shows you how bad things have been. That was a much better era than now, back when Isaiah Thomas was getting sued for sexual harassment. And here's the thing, I've spoken on air about Isaiah Thomas before. The greatest small man to ever play the game, no doubt about it. Isaiah Thomas, 20 points, 10 assists, book it. The Bad Boys era, 2 championships. And he's such a great commentator. Watching him on NBA TV, man, it's like sitting around with a very learned friend talking basketball. He's so great to watch. But what he did in the Knicks front office was inexcusable. It was inexcusable, and that's why they ended up having to settle with I think her name is pronounced Anusha Brown Sanders, but I may be mispronouncing her name, and I apologize for that. I've actually never heard anyone say her name because that's the kind of media we have. Since it's kind of a hand grenade, no one talks about things on TV. Like, remember when the Hawks had Thabo Sefolosha sitting there and no one would mention on air that the NYPD broke his leg? No one would say it. Similarly, people don't talk about what happened in terms of the sexual harassment of this Madison Square Garden employee by Isaiah Lord Thomas. People don't talk about it. So I've actually never heard her name said. I've only read it, never heard her name said. But yeah, here to see a basketball analyst. I don't care if I like what you do on the basketball court or not. That kind of stuff is inexcusable. And it stinks to me that women have to go through that in the workplace. That's what I think about it. With that said, to get back to David Lee, because I went way off track. Get back to David Lee. David Lee back in those days was a double-double machine, 2010 guy. We know David Lee has a multifaceted, versatile offensive game. Not great at anything, but very good at a lot of things. He's a very similar game to Al Horford in terms of he's sort of athletic, athletic enough because he's a very mobile big man that is a quick leaper. He's effective in the pick and pop game. He can shoot from the elbow, and he's also can pick and roll and finish at the rim on a lob. He can put the ball on the floor and score. He's left-handed, so he gets away with going left a lot and not having to go right, but nevertheless, he's effective. So David Lee has a very versatile game, and he also can bang glass on both ends. He's not a great offensive rebounder or a great defensive rebounder, but he's competent at both, and he puts it together for a very solid rebounding package as a player. So the downside is he's horrific defensively. He needs a ton of help in all situations. He has really bad feet defensively, and for being a guy who's got some decent athleticism and some decent bounce, you can shoot over him so easily. It's actually the major difference between him and Al Horford. Al Horford carries that versatility to the defensive end. So that's the type of player that David Lee is. Or is he? Because David Lee, a couple of years back in the playoffs, hurt his hip. And we haven't seen David Lee in an extended capacity since. He basically lost his job to Draymond Green, and then we didn't really see him anymore over the course of multiple games playing 30 to 35 minutes. We haven't seen him since. I wonder if he can get back to that form. And Golden State had no reason to gamble on him. If they felt like they could get an asset of any kind in return for him, they were right to move him because they know they don't need him. He basically fell out of rotation. He did play a little bit in the finals, thankfully, so we didn't have to watch Bogut anymore. But we don't know if he's going to be able to return to form, and they knew they didn't need him. So this was a shrewd move by Golden State in a string of shrewd moves that has led to an NBA championship for them. Boston is getting a guy that, we know what we think he used to. We know what he used to be, and we know what we think he can be. So, and frankly, they're in rebuild mode anyway, and they don't care. They were getting rid of the Gerald Wallace contract, and that's really all they seem to care about. And Gerald Wallace, speaking of guys, can they still go? This is an opportunity for Gerald Wallace to show whether or not he can still go. Gerald Wallace is an example of another player that was just crushed by the expansion draft. Rick Adelman didn't play him in Sacramento, and they probably would have won a championship if they had. Gerald Wallace, for those of you that are real NBA fans, the days in Charlotte, Gerald Wallace was a straight up monster. Lockdown defender. He's one of those guys too, the fantasy guys will know about this. He was a 2 steals, 2 blocks guy. So he was one of those rare animals that was, out of the passing lane, steals, then protecting the rim. He was one of the best rebounding small forwards in the league throughout his entire prime. Most of those years, he was the best. Not a shooter from the outside, but he always had the athletic ability where he was finishing around the rim, and that's what's most important anyway, because those are all the high percentage shots. And in his prime, at his best, Gerald Wallace, 2007, 2008, 19.4 points per game, 0.9 blocks, 2.1 steals, 6 rebounds, 3.5 assists. He shot 45% from the field. These things get lost because the team was so bad. He gets lost. He was never on national TV. When I was watching him, I was always watching him on the internet through a league pass feed or something like that, or I was into a local feed, and then I could watch Charlotte's local broadcast. But he only made one All-Star game in 2009, 2010. That's that year where Larry Brown got the Bobcats into the playoffs some kind of way, and then they got swept by Orlando. That was a fun team, man. And if Tyson Chandler had not been injured and been able to play effectively, they may have had an opportunity to get out of the first round. That was the Gerald Wallace, Steven Jackson team, man, and that was a fun team, man. But we can see if Gerald Wallace, this is an opportunity for Gerald Wallace. Maybe he'll get a chance to kind of resurrect his career and go out in a way that a good veteran wants to go out. You don't ever want to go out just kind of on the end of benches where you've kind of been maligned for having a contract people say you don't deserve. Which, by the way, since we do knowledge, let's talk real quick about contracts. Gerald Wallace signed a 3-year, $30 million deal back when Brooklyn was trying to go for a title for 1 year, right? What people have to keep in mind is whenever you look at these contracts, the NBA, when you sign a contract, you're not an employee of that team. I know it may be that way even on paper, but that's not really what happens, because you're an employee of the NBA. Unless you're one of the rare players, and only a few players at a time have no trade clauses in their contracts. Unless you're one of these rare players with no trade, you can be sent anywhere in the country at any time by your employer, the NBA. So when you see these contracts a lot of times, in that instance, you always have to think of the context and look at why the team is doing it. Brooklyn wasn't paying him like they knew he would be awesome for 3 years. They were paying him for 1 year. And however, the rest of it is just manipulating the contract to fit in the cap way you want it to be. Because you may say, why didn't they just give him a 1 year, $30 million deal? If we give him a 1 year, $30 million deal, first of all, that is beyond the max contract, which max contracts, as we talked about before on this show, there's no reason in the world there's such thing as a max contract other than to artificially keep salaries down. If you're a hedge fund manager, you don't have a max contract. So why do you have a max contract in the NBA? Doesn't make sense. Frankly, it's an anti-capitalistic concept, frankly. But you can't pay someone $30 million anyway. And plus, two, it allows you to spread it out. And hey, maybe he will be effective at the end of the 3-year deal. So you always have to look at that. And when leagues go around and cry broke, you always remember and think about this. The Memphis Grizzlies just gave Marc Gasol, who's 30 years old, $110 million, like he's Kevin Garnett or something. Come on. Like, come on. You crying broke, you just gave Marc Gasol $110 million. Marc Gasol is a good player. That's it. That's where it ends. Like, in our center conversation, I didn't even bring him up because he's not bad enough or good enough where I even felt the need to bring him up. And I didn't omit him on purpose. I just forgot about him because there's nothing spectacular about him. He doesn't really do anything very well. He does a lot of things fine. He cobbles it together into being reasonably effective. But I'll tell you like this, when you watch Memphis play, watch how many times he draws a double versus how many times Zach Randolph draws a double. And then when Zach Randolph gets doubled, watch how effective he is. He's not that effective. That's why when they get into the playoffs, teams double and then sometimes triple. They played the Spurs a few years ago, and the Spurs triple teamed Zach Randolph. And Marc Gasol played okay. He's a guy that you can kind of leave him. What's he going to do? He's not going to dominate the game. If Zach Randolph is being single cover during all game, he gets 35 points. And you get blown out. But they're not going to do that. They're going to watch. Zach Randolph's going to throw people around for a quarter, and then they go start sending that double team. And the double teams come in many different ways. Sometimes it comes a hard double right on the catch. Sometimes they look at him, wait for him to take 2 dribbles, then the double comes. You mix it up. And the Spurs are very good at mixing it up like that because they have an actual system, and Greg Popovich is just a master at the scouting and the coaching. But with David Lee and Gerald Wallace, this is a chance for a little bit of redemption for both of them, a chance for both of them to try to get their careers back on track. More so David Lee because he's not as advanced in his career as Gerald Wallace is. Gerald Wallace is at the end of his career, and David Lee is going to get more playing time. But I'm really happy for David Lee because he got his ring, and he really deserved it. And I'll tell you why. A player like David Lee that comes to your franchise and helps you build the building blocks to get to that title, just because he wasn't really in rotation anymore at the end of the journey, doesn't mean he didn't make heavy contributions that were essential for you to get to the end goal. So David Lee is a good, solid player, and I'm rooting for him in Boston. Hopefully he can go there and pile up some nice statistics to end his career, and continue to make money as an NBA player. That's a cool thing. And Gerald Wallace, hopefully he'll get out there and be able to produce and for Golden State. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that trade. To move along, there the story the story is just this has gotten a little bit out of hand, but it's more interesting than it is shocking. DeAndre Jordan verbally committed to Dallas, so the reports said he did. It was going to be a max deal. They can't offer as many years as the Clippers, but he's going to get the max, get his 20 million per. Then he started having second thoughts. Now, me personally, I can see why. Dallas does not have a good roster right now. Losing Monte Ellis was a devastating blow. I don't know where they're going to, and to be clear about Monte Ellis and what he provides. Monte Ellis, one, is extremely durable. He's rarely hurt. The only time I can remember him getting hurt was when he got hurt in like a moped accident in the offseason, some dumb stuff like that. He does not get hurt on the court. He's extremely durable. Two, he's effective scoring in a lot of different ways. He scores in transition. He can push the ball as a primary ball handler. He also is fantastic in pick and roll situations. In pick and roll situations, he proved to be a devastating player. See, he was mostly an ISO player in Golden State. Milwaukee at the time was just a disaster area, so he didn't get to show what he could do there at all. When he gets to Golden State, where he's routinely in pick and roll situations with Tyson Chandler, one of the most dangerous lob catchers in the league, and then in pick and pop situations with Dirk Nowitzki. It proved to be a matchup nightmare because he's so quick and can go from, his change of speeds are devastating. He can go from a very slow gait to a burst of speed and be at the rim finishing. And he's an incredible finisher at the rim. He has great body control, good bounce. He's a great athlete and a really good basketball player. And he's very versatile in the way he can get his offense in. And he's an underrated defender. People talk about him like he can't defend. He's actually a decent defender, even though he's undersized. So Monte Ellis is losing. Monte Ellis was a devastating blow to this team. I don't know who's going to facilitate now for them, because Chandler Parsons is not a facilitator. Chandler Parsons, like most small forwards, is a catch and shoot guy, or a catch, get you running out a little too hard on the closeout. Then he can put the ball on the floor and finish with a dunk, or he can pitch it to big man and leave it to him for a dunk. That's the type of player Chandler Parsons is. Like I said, like most small forwards. I don't know who's going to facilitate for them. They have Devin Harris, Raymond Felton. I don't know how they're going to consistently get their offense. Dirk Nowitzki is a much diminished player at this point in his career. I don't know. I don't know about Dallas. So the Dallas situation, I don't like it. What we do know is under Mark Cuban, Dallas has consistently been in contention. Now, he already had a Dirk Nowitzki sitting there, but hey, a lot of teams have a superstar and can't put anything around him. Mark Cuban has consistently had them in contention. So you figure they're going to make it right some kind of way. But there was really no basketball reason to leave the Clippers. The reason to leave the Clippers would be the much reported I don't like Chris Paul thing, which is fine. Chris Paul acts like a jerk half the time. He's dirty. I mean, maybe you don't care about that, but Chris Paul is dirty from time to time. He's not Dellavedova dirty, but he's dirty. You see the clips of him hitting people in the groin and silly stuff like that. He's just kind of a jerk, is what it seems like. But so what? That's what I would say to that. I don't know. Does that matter to you more than winning? Does that matter to you more than playing for a really, really outstanding coach that helped develop you into the player you are today? If you're comfortable with your boss, that to me should outweigh what's going on with a coworker. To me, I'm not going to, but hey, he's got to do what is right for him and what's right for his family. Maybe he just wanted to be closer to Houston. Who knows? That's where he's from. That's where he's at now. And apparently they're having some kind of Clippers slumber party. And it was funny. They're like, yeah, and Chris Paul is there, and Blake Griffin is there. I'm like, oh, okay. And then Doc Rivers is there, and Paul Pierce is there. I said, oh, man, they invited Paul Pierce. Like, he's a vet. Yeah. And they said, and JJ Redick's there. And I was like, why they invite him? like if you invite JJ Redick, well, why didn't you invite Jamal Crawford? Like, why you invite JJ Redick? Like if when we getting down to those players, it's like, well, man, why don't we invite Big Baby Davis and invite, like, just start inviting dudes, right? Have a whole team come over his house. But regardless, DeAndre Jordan now, as you've probably seen with the Twitter emojis and all this stuff, is considering coming back to the Clippers. Man, I don't know, man. That's funny to me. Now, here's the thing. For all of these sports writers, and I've read this in two different articles in major publications. One of them was ESPN. And ESPN is just that's how you feel when you're watching ESPN. You never feel like, man, I'm watching competent sports reporting. You never feel like that. It's just silliness, right? I've read a couple of places that this is possibly unprecedented. Okay, in general, I don't know what you're talking about, because until the ink is dry on that contract, people do stuff all the time, say they're going to do stuff and then do something else. Unless it's on a contract, everything that you're saying is air. That's the way American culture works. I don't know how business deals are done in other cultures, but hey, boss will tell you promotion is coming, Then it don't happen, and they go, "Hey, we weren't able to do it. Somebody overruled me." People say stuff all the time and don't honor the agreement. Now, I'll let you in because we're doing the knowledge today. I'll let you in to a cultural thing. From my point of view, word is bond. You're supposed to honor what you say. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with American business, but I'm just saying what I think about it and what culturally the way it should go to me. With all that said, this is not unprecedented in basketball. I remember when Horace Grant supposedly made a handshake deal with the Bulls and then signed with Orlando. And every sports writer in town was irate and calling them names. That's when it became really popular to call him Ho Grant. It was like, I see it show for Horace. And I said, and here's the thing about stuff like that, right? Stop with that was back in the days before the internet, but this is like internet thug, studio gangster type stupid stuff. Stop calling these, professional athletes. Stop calling them names like that. That's so bush league and silly. But that was going around on sports radio and with sports writers all over during the 90s to call Horace Grant Ho all the time. As though you would like walk up to him to his face and do it, right? Which you wouldn't do. Regardless of whether you would do it or not, it's just silly and juvenile. It has no place to me in a professional environment. It's just silly. But so you understand and so you know, and for kids watching this right now that don't know anything about the 90s Bulls and the Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan era, Horace Grant, when he left to go to Orlando and got his payday from Orlando, supposedly he had a deal in place with Reinsdorf, a handshake deal, and supposedly he violated it. So when you read that this is unprecedented, it's not unprecedented. And those sports writers that are covering basketball should remember this. I remember it. But then again, I'm the senior basketball analyst, and that's why there's some clown writing for a paper. That's why. If DeAndre Jordan stays with the Clippers, he's in a much more complete situation. The Clippers now have they did a slight upgrade in Paul Pierce for Matt Barnes. They still need to get younger on the wing. Jamal Crawford is really their most legitimate option as shooting guard. JJ Redick is a standstill shooter that is only as effective as Chris Paul is at getting him the ball. He's very effective on wide open jump shots, but that's all they can do. Can't finish at the rim, can't put the ball on the floor, you can't defend his position. He's not any good. The not being able to defend his position has been very devastating. They have a lot of trouble defending the wing, a lot of trouble. So when he's in the starting lineup, you're in trouble with the shooting guard position. Not going to be able to check anybody. They obviously have in Chris Paul, one of the best point guards in the league, lockdown defender, distributor, scorer. He's a superstar, future Hall of Famer. And you have Blake Griffin, who deficient defensively, but does give you everything else. He can score on the block to an extent. He can shoot out to about 18 feet. He's obviously extremely athletic with the lobs and running the floor. He's a superstar big man. It's plain and simple. So DeAndre Jordan rounds out that starting lineup. And it's starting to look like there's some kind of vision. If he signs, he will get the max, just like Marc Gasol got, 5 years, $110 million. Which again, when the dollar amounts are flying around, that's a great thing. Whether it be Marc Gasol, DeAndre Jordan, whoever, even the Goran Dragic deal, which when you scale it and look at his career, it makes no sense. But it's always good to see the players that are sweating and bleeding and breaking their bodies up on the court. It's always great to see them getting a big piece of the pie. And because the dollars are being made, and those are the guys that deserve them. So this is what's going on right now. For all I know, tomorrow, as soon as the moratorium is lifted, for all I know, DeAndre Jordan signs with Dallas, and all of this was just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Who knows? But right now, as it stands, it looks like he's leaning back toward back towards staying home with the Clippers. You guys can go on the internet and look at all the funny emojis and look at Blake Griffin said he got a tent pitched in the backyard. And he's sleeping outside, and it's very interesting and it's a good day. So that's the Senior Basketball Analyst. That's the roundup for today, and you know that.
Suckers I'm all, they fall and crawl into the pit of purgatory. I go for glory. I'm taking inventory, counting all the